Well, you can't imagine just how delighted I am to be standing on Irvine's island talking about the Irvine family and with my connection to the family. William Irvine, that built the house, was my great-grandfather. And I'm glad to say we have the 5th generation with me here tonight, my son, and he, believe it or not, has got a drop of the boats in him as well, and he's involved in boat decking, believe it or not. The family worked between the island and Henry Street. But I want to start off and tell you, every one of you have somewhere in the world that you think's the most important place in your whole existence. Just you think about that. I can go back, just close my eyes and go back to that wee drop of water, the stretch of water between Henry Street and the island. And that was where I would say I was most happy and started off my childhood dream with Lough Erne, the boats, wildfowl today up, as you say, went on to the BTO and things like that. But grew up in a natural environment and I was extremely lucky. So that was the centre of my universe. I learned to swim there too. No swimming pools in those days. My grandfather, Jimmy Irvine, just put a rope underneath my arms, tied a boat to the stakes that were still along the island in the 50s, 40s, and tied the rope underneath my arms, put me over the boat, and Joan started to swim yanked me up. And that's the way I learned to swim. Didn't matter what effluent was coming out of the Scotch door or what other brown stuff was bobbing along the lough as well. But anyway, I survived and I'm thankful for that. So I'm going to tell you a list mainly the story of my Irvine family. It has other tentacles that need a lot of work done on as well and that need somebody else to have the interest in it. This island, the first photograph I ever saw of Irvine's island, it was just flat, and it had the tents on it belonging to the army, and it was one of their summer camps. So whenever William Irvine bought the island in 1893, he bought just a bare bit of land. Now, the area of the island had increased by an acre in 12 years, or no, more than that. Whenever the drainage people had done the first lot of drainage, there was an increase of acreage here. The original island was quite small. The original island that William bought measured 3 acres, 2 roods, 37 perches. And this was an increase whenever the water levels dropped of an acre, which is quite a lot of land, a rood and 19 perches. William bought this island from Lord Enniskillen for the large sum of £132. You can work out on your computer and you can find out how much that is in today's money. He borrowed £99, which was a considerable amount of money in those days because the annual wage in Ireland was £23 per annum. So William, I don't know where he got the money from or how he had the nerve, but anyway, he bought the island and he already was thinking big, shall I say. William and Margaret Irvine had 8 children, then 6 boys, and the last 2 were 2 girls. And the boys were called Richard, William, James, Frederick. Just going to go back to the original photograph, the first one, that one. This was, you see how bare the island was? And also, as well as that, can you already see the number of boats round the island to where they were building on the island in these sheds and on the mainland still, because William still had his shed, as we always call it, or in the Fermanagh vernacular, the shade. And that's a picture, and the small one there, you can see the shade in Henry Street. And in Henry Street there were 3 other buildings for boat building as well. One on the shore, the little one that looks like a garage down in the shore, and it actually was where William's son Freddie lived out his last days. He actually was wounded at the Somme and spent his last days there. But that's a lovely one here. This always intrigues me, the pole. Somebody said that was for the electric. But the electric didn't come to Enniskillen until the 1930s. And then, as well as that, another thing that really showed up is, when you look back at old pictures there, you can actually see the orchard. I wasn't sure when the orchards were planted, but you can actually see, because we live at the edge of orchard country now in Moy, and you can actually see the posts there for that. Now, the boys weren't all born on the island. Annie was the only one that was born on the island. You can go to the next one. But this isn't Annie. This is a grandchild. That's William Victor, son of the eldest son, Richard. And Richard was already working in the Scotch store at that stage, and his brother, William, the second son, he was actually in the census. He was an engineer, and he had the lovely job of making sure the great big boiler and everything else that kept the Scotch store on the Sligo Road ticking over, he kept it going with the furnace, and he'd help her there. And I can remember coming down the ramp into it, and he also had the lovely job, it'll just show my age, pulling the horn. Do any of you remember the horn? Well, it just shows you how old I am. Everything in Enniskillen moved by the Scotch store horn.
That's right.
7:45 in the morning, first horn. And that was when the men were supposed to be in, ready for your work. And then the second horn went at 8 o'clock and you started your work. The same thing again at 1 o'clock, horn went, you went home. 1:45, horn went to be ready for your work, 2 o'clock. And the same thing in the evening at 6 o'clock. This is a lovely photograph here of the family, and it just shows you that they had a wee bit behind them. Because as our wildfire friend here, Nigel, has talked, if you shot anything in Lough Erne, you ate it. If you fished for it, you ate it too. So nothing was wasted. All the Irvines in this photograph all had their shotguns. They all had their dogs, and it shows them all quite. One person said, oh, it's a bit like the Wild West. But the thing is, it's not the Wild West. That's the way people survived in those days. William was married, and this was Richard was married, and this was his first child. That child actually joined the army at the end of the First World War, so he was involved at the same time as his uncles. Annie, the youngest of the family, she was born on the island. That was the only one of William's family who was born on the island. And at the 1900, there's a lovely record in the Battery School, where the Trimbles lived. That was a female school. And Annie went to school there, aged 3. And her address was Castle Island. So then the family didn't spend that long. William and Margaret didn't spend that long on the island. They actually moved back quite quickly to the mainland, because my grandfather then was the next person to live in the house, with Margaret, his wife. Howard Irvine and Robert Irvine were born in the house there, and then the boys were sick, and my grandmother thought it was too much, so she had to get back to the mainland, and my mother was born in Henry Street, in the last of the red brick houses on Henry Street. The island, could we have the next one, please? This shows the house later in the 20s, and these are 2 cousins in the boat trying to row, 2 young, Billy Newton and Jim Irvine, And you can see where the island had its haystacks. You can see the orchard on the right hand side well up, and you can see the boats for sale along there, as well as the bums. And they would have built boats and had them for sale. So you could come along like to a shop and buy it. And if you wanted a good boat, like the Rolls Royce or the Porsche you could have now for your cars, you had to have an Irvine boat, because the Irvine boat was well balanced and was easy to row, and with the Irvine oars you could go up the loch, down the loch, and you could row anywhere. The next photograph, please. Now this is the one that Gaby knows well. This one had a remarkable history. This boat is called the Madden boat, and it was owned by a family up in Clones. And the story is that they came down to Enniskillen, bought the boat, two brothers, I think, and they rowed the boat for 2 days, back up the loch, up the river to Clones, and used the boat, painted the boat and everything else. When it got past its better days, it was put up in rafters in the hen house. And then somebody decided they would give it to Lough Erne Heritage. And then it was handed to Gaby, that wonderful man. Gaby is absolutely wonderful with his hands. And Gaby fixed, I think he cut a wee bit off the back of it, or tidied it up. And you can actually see the lovely shape and the rubbing board red, although the Irvine boat wouldn't have had a black top, it would have had grey and red rubbing board. And you can see that there. So we reckon that that must be the oldest of the Irvine boats that we know of. Boat races were normal on the lake, and every summer, right through, we would have had boat races. We still had boat races right through to the 50s and 60s until they closed off Victoria Stream. And the boat race track, or place to go and row, was from the point of the island, above the bridge, through the bridge, down Victoria Stream to the shuttles, and back again. In 1890, the two Irvines, the two eldest boys, William and Richard, they, that was one of, I should have said about Jimmy. This is Jimmy Irvine, grandfather Jimmy. He, no matter where he went, and this was in Mulletmore, not that long before he, I suppose, passed away, he loved if he went down along anywhere to look to see where there was a boat. And he would come down and we'd look, now not this one, it's not an urban boat, but he would say, I built that one in the 20s and I sold it to so-and-so, and he would know all his boats, like that. Can I have the next one, please? That again shows the stakes out along the water here, the boats tied up here. They also would have been up here, and you can see, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, stanchion or stanchion? Stanchion. And that was where you went down to get on the boat in the point of the isle and step down into your Lough Erne boat. You didn't go to these fancy high jetties. You had to go along to a stanchion and get down into your boat. The Scotch store there was a means of employment for the Irvines, no matter what. If they hadn't enough boat building, or in the winter, if things were slow, they went to the Scotch store. In the 1890s, the boat races were always against the military from over there in the barracks. And it was always great when the townies won, because they were always the best. They would know to go from different points, the rest of them would probably go straight down the loch. In 1891, they actually had a rowing club in Enniskillen. It was formed in Irvine's boathouse, over on Henry Street side.
Is that the shed there?
No.
Sorry, come in.
On Henry Street side, in a small painting there, and it was a shed. And half of it was William's house, where he lived, and the other half, you could build about, I'd say about 3 boats in it. And they had the bit on the shore, another one up on the land a bit, and then the small one where Freddie lived as well. So they had quite a lot of places where they were building boats. In 1907, there's an account that the first ever motor launch was built by William Irvine and Sons, boat builders, Henry Street. And the Irvine colours for the launches that they did, their boats, the rowboats, were grey with a red rubbing board. The launches that they built were maroon with a yellow rubbing board. And it was only afterwards I realised, when we talked about the bigger one that they built, the Arowana, it was maroon. And I can remember it, right, excuse me lady, the back there, that nice colour that you're wearing. That was the colour of the launches, was a yellow rubbing board. James appeared to be the main boat builder, and in the 1901 census he was put down as a boat builder. His father, William Senior, who built the house on the island and everything else, where was he? He was working in the Scotch store. And it was only when the next census came in 1911 that both William and James were boat builders. Oui. And the boats they built would have gone all over the county, further afield, and Ballyshannon, down the whole estuaries and everything else, Mullaghmore, you name it, it was there. And also, can I have the next one? The tourism was a big thing as well, believe it or not. People think tourism started in Fermanagh in the 60s when they brought the first cruisers on. But the Irvines were already bringing tourists down in 1912, because there's a mention in Black's guidebook to Belfast in the north of Ireland. Boats can be hired near the bridge at a very moderate cost. And the tourists were taken down in boats. If they couldn't get them all into one boat, they would bring the second boat. And if they needed the second boat, they would tow it. And this shows the way they would go down the lake towing the boats. This is actually a photograph of the Irvine family going down for a picnic. This is Stanley, the youngest son. This James's. Dorothy, that might have known Mrs. Chambers in the town. Margaret, my grandmother, and this is James here. When World War I began, James, Frederick and Thompson all enlisted. Do I have the next slide, please? That's another one. That shows John Irvine. He was a boat builder, family too. And this is Fred Collins, who actually joined up in the Second World War with Uncle Howard. And it shows how you could bring a good crowd down the lake just using one engine. Next, please. And this shows them going down again, and this boat passes around. This is at the Long Island. You always know the Long Island with the two humps and the bit in the middle, and that was always a good picnic place to go to. And this is the one now, whenever in 1915, when the Irvines joined up to go down. This is Canon Webb from the cathedral, and he came down to Finner Camp to see the Enniskillen men that had joined up. And if some of you, you're probably not old enough, you don't remember the horn in the Scotch store, but these were Finner Camp's two water towers. Bundoran always needed water to be raised up because it's quite low now. So these were the two towers at Finner Camp, and this is James Irvine here, my grandfather. I can't find any of the rest, but Granda's face is unmistakable. Next, please. Now, I said about the livery of the Irvine launches. This was the biggest or the largest launch that the James Irvine built, and this was for his great friend James Cranson. And James Cranson said he wanted a large launch with a big inboard engine in it. There was no place big enough, and all the sheds and everything else they had was to have it built in the castle barracks. So the Arowana was built in the castle barracks, and it was the maroon colour as well. And it was still on the lake right through to the 60s. In 1945, it was on the point of the island. Around 1939, until 1945 it was on the point of the island, along with Stanley Irvine's little red racing boat, and they were there for the duration. Could I have the next one, please?
2 minutes, yeah, three.
I'm not near the... This is another one of the Arowana, Ronnie Chambers, his sister, and the grandparents at the back. Next, please. And this is another one of the Arowana. You know, see, Granny always wore her hat. She always, and if you notice them all, they were always dressed going out in the lake. You didn't go out in your old togs. Next, please. Now, this is an interesting one for the wildfowler too. This is Granda Irvine here, Jimmy. In 1929, he was shooting with his brother John on a point of Devonish Island, and they were after duck. And John took a shot at the duck, and unfortunately the shot pellets hit a rock and hit Granda in his right eye, and he lost his right eye. So any of the photographs after that of Jimmy Irvine, you'll always see Jimmy holding with his right eye away from the next, please. Now this is one for you, Brian. This is the Enniskillen being launched by the Irvine family in 1931 in Henry Street. And this is the opening. This is over here where the laundry was, and say up to, where's it, Windmill Heights or something now, up the top of the hill. But that's a lovely one there. Could I have the next one, please? There's it pulled up on one of the islands. Don't ask me where. There's no names on it or anything. Next, please. Castle Caldwell.
It is fine.
Might be. Next, please. This is my mother posing at pretending to go. This was taken by my father, and I reckon it was early in summer of 1931 before they were married. This was the Irvine family again to show their boat with the whole family out. Gladys, Stanley, grandmother Margaret, Dorothy, and Georgina at the back. Next. This again shows another sort of boat that the Irvines built with the black top of it, again with the family. And that's my father. Next, James Cranston with my grandfather fishing. And this is a lovely one. It shows when they went down for a picnic, they really had a great time. And the next one, please. This is a lovely one here. This is Billy Newton. Isn't he a smart fella down there? This is where we called the Bilberry Island. And this was one of our places to go for picnics and everything else. And this is where the boys would have stayed out for maybe a week or 2 weeks. And that was their holidays down the lake on the Bilberry Island. And this was an old bus that Howard Irvine converted along with his friend Fred Collins. And Billy was a cousin. His mother was Annie Irvine, the youngest of the family, next Luke. This is one of the launches again, built by this Irvine. I think that's James Cranston, you see, and he wanted a bigger launch. Next. And this is one taken from the Bilberry of these boys off the shore at the Bilberry Island. And that's an iconic one. That's Jim Ginn from Market Street. Robin Conway, whose parents had a shop in Eastridge Street. Ralph Latham, who lived in Willie Terrace, he became an orthodontist to the Arabian nobility, or whatever you call it, the sheiks and all the people out in the Far East. Mercy Campbell, or Ken Campbell from Padgett Square, and Howard Patterson, my brother. And next, please. This again shows picnic time down with the family. It's great in the lot, and again you see the nice shape of an Irvine boat. Next. Granda always loved to fish, and he couldn't get a photograph taken of this because really this was something he shouldn't have done. He was out one Sunday morning with an otter board. You ever heard of an otter board?
Yes.
And this was his catch, and he was very sheepish, but he wanted to show his nice catch out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Right, next. And that's his last photograph, taken bailing the boat out at Henry Street. I think that has given you a snip. Oh, whenever in the 1950s, the island was used by the It was rented by old man Frank Lunny, and he had a cow on the island, and he would come over every day and milk the cow. And then the Lallies lived on the island for a while, but then in the 1950s, round about 1953, there were massive floods and everything else, and that was the end of anybody living in the house on the island. And that particular year I came down, I was at Stranwillis, and I came out with the man who was to be my husband, and he rowed me across to the island, and I climbed the trees from the boat and picked the apples off the island trees. So that was it. Richard Pearce has a photograph of that, but I don't have it on the slide. I think that then the last of it. This is the headstone to William Irvine in Rossari graveyard. William, the founder of the whole family with Margaret, died in 1931. And that was the demise of the large-scale boat building by the Irvines. Because you know yourselves, at deaths and funerals and christenings and weddings, there's always a falling out. So there was a mighty falling out of the Irvine family, and the whole thing disintegrated. But James and his son Howard, and Howard's son John, remained boat builders and still kept on building the iconic Irvine boat and the iconic Irvine oars. The headstone is in Rossari graveyard, and if you notice the lovely wooden replica around the end, and as well as that, in Rossari, he had all his family buried round him as well. So the Irvine's resting place is at Rossari. Just one word on the house. The house was vested and the island was vested from the family in 1960. And it was always a joke with the Irvines and through the family. When the Irvines built anything, they built it to last. And by golly, they built the wee house well, because it hasn't had that done to it by the council in 60 years. It's an iconic building on the loch and one that should be preserved. So I've tried to speak to the council and everything else, and we tried through the Lough Erne Fellowship and things like that, but they're not interested. So the little house is still standing in spite of the all. So that's the story of the Irvine stone and of my particular interest. I'm sorry for going over my time, but I had those lovely photographs and had to show you guys.